Hi, I'm Jose, and yes, that is my real name. It's not a meme. You may have heard about me in the MapleStory world lately because I've just been super popular, like Jose this, Jose that, but I myself have been kind of MIA from the content creation space because, well, as you can imagine, being a Jose myself, I've got hella shifts to clock in for. And now that Daddy Inkwell plans to give MapleStory Global its own Spanish language pack, my job as a Jose is about to become much easier. But today is Cinco de Mayo, so as a Mexican American myself, I get to take a break from farming for other people and have a little day off. And boy, oh my god, are my hands tired! Okay, jokes and memes aside, if you don't know what I'm talking about, let me explain. Recently, there's been this running gag in the MapleStory community, especially amongst Twitch streams, where the name Jose is being used as code for buying farming service. So someone who hires another person to farm on their account would basically be described as someone who hires Jose. So people will say like, oh, who's farming on your account today? Is it you or Jose? You get the idea. So service buying in MMOs has always been a thing, and different gaming communities have their own code names and terms for these types of activities. For example, if you've been watching Stoops lately on Twitch, he's probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, Lost Ark streamer here in the Western world. He's been streaming MapleStory lately, and I learned from his Twitch stream that in Lost Ark, they refer to their Jose's as rice farmers.
But you guys, instead of saying WRMT, you guys say W Jose. You guys are all the same, bro.
And obviously there's a lot of cultural subtext that we can analyze when it comes to these naming conventions. But before I go any further into this discussion, I just want to say that this is simply meant to be for entertainment, to be a social commentary, because we're going to be talking about some very interesting things in today's video, but I am not condoning purchasing, selling, or even recommending farming services, account sharing, or using third-party programs for MapleStory or any other games out there that do not allow these sorts of activities. I personally do not like to use bots because of some reasons that I'll be talking about in this video later on, but we are going to be talking about a few things today, like number one, how did this Jose meme actually get started in the MapleStory community? Number two, why do players even risk getting their accounts banned in the first place by purchasing farming services? And number three, is it all a meme or do Jose's actually exist in this world? Let's get started. So one of the things that brought a lot of attention to this Jose meme is the Ereklo game stream on Twitch. So unless you've been living under a rock, you probably know who these twins are, but they've been dominating it in the MapleStory content creation space lately, especially on Twitch. And I think they're the first ever MapleStory Twitch streamers to get over 1,000 viewers per stream on a consistent basis, which is actually pretty cool. It means that the game is probably healthy in a lot of ways. But these twins, they are super grinders. They put like basically more than a full-time job's worth of hours into the game on a daily basis. And because of that, a lot of their viewers actually joke around and say that they're botting, that they're buying farming service, etc., which probably contributed to the existence of the meme. And also I'm sure that the Jose meme was influenced by the fact that one of the twins, Joe, his name sounds very similar to Jose, Jose. But one of the things that made them really popular was their iconic account showcases, where in these segments on the stream, viewers will come on the stream to showcase their gear, their stats, and maybe some of their bossing techniques. And every so often you'll have someone come on the stream who seems a little suspicious, like they're asking questions that they probably shouldn't be asking. Like for example, someone who is over level 280 or over level 285 will be asking basic questions about how to play their class, but the expectation at that point is that at that point in the game, you at least have an intermediate understanding of what your class is capable of, what your skills do, and what the game mechanics are. And so then in those moments, the Twitch chat starts to accuse these players of buying farming services, buying their account, or ultimately hiring Jose. And whether or not these accusations are correct, I'm basically not here to judge that. At the end of the day, that is Nexon's job and they can do their own investigation based on their own reports. But we have to ask ourselves, what is Jose service and how does it work? So I've personally never hired Jose because again, I am my own Jose, so I don't really know all the nitty-gritty details, but here's how it probably works. Basically, someone finds a service provider somewhere, probably on the internet or maybe through word of mouth. And I imagine that word of mouth is actually pretty important because this is such a low-key activity. And I imagine people who bought together probably recommend botting services, etc., etc. And then the MapleStory account owner, once they find their service provider, they give their information to the Jose so that way they can farm on the account in exchange for real life money. And once the Jose has the account information, they can log onto the account and farm for their designated shift, I guess. And then the account owner can do basically whatever they want with their time off of the game. And if I had to guess, a lot of these people who purchase farming services like this are probably people in full-time jobs, or maybe they just have a lot of commitments in life, but they still want to progress their character in the MapleStory world. Or basically, maybe they're just rich and they just have a bunch of money to blow and they don't mind risk getting banned. So we have to keep in mind that in MMORPGs specifically, they generally attract people who have money to spend, because a lot of MMOs on the market are big pay-to-win experiences. And usually in MMOs, you can pay real life money to progress your character very, very quickly. But in MapleStory, the majority of people play in the reboot/heroic servers. And in this kind of server, it's kind of an oddity in the MMO world, because there is no economy. You can't trade with players in the game. And coupled with that, there are a very limited amount of items actually in the cash shop that can actually help you progress. I mean, sure, you can argue that the MVP status is a pay-to-win mechanic, but even with this mechanic in the game, the playing field, I would say, is still pretty leveled. And I think this is one of the big reasons why people enjoy Reboot so much. Like, yes, you have to make all of your gear yourself and farm your own resources, and you can't buy pre-made gear pieces or nodestones or fragments in the auction house. Every single piece of progress you make is uniquely yours. And I think people like this because it makes the grind feel meaningful and competitive. But for the person who has maybe a bunch of cash but not a bunch of time, it presents a problem. You can't really progress in the game unless you put time into it, and you also need to farm your own resources to upgrade your gear and get your levels so that way you can make it to these certain bosses. So with that said, the gear progression and the bossing aspects of the game are probably people's favorite part of the game. A lot of people, in fact, find the grind to be a big bore, but they still put up with it because they love the gear progression and the bossing content so much. And I think at the end of the day, it's just a really good metaphor for life. I mean, if you want to experience the most beautiful parts of life, like joy, love, and laughter, you also have to put up with the boring bits, or the sad bits, or the frustrating bits, and for sure, the grind can be boring and frustrating. But even with that said, a lot of people in MapleStory actually do enjoy the grind. I find it relaxing and rhythmic and satisfying, and in fact, the grind is one of my favorite parts about this game. But there's no doubt that it becomes like a huge mental chore at times, especially when you reach those levels like in the 280s, 290s, where every single level up takes over 100 hours. So I can kind of see why people would be tempted by these farming services. So I asked some guildmates to get a second opinion why they think they would hire someone like a Jose, or why these people would hire someone like a Jose, and they agreed. They pointed out that the person most likely wants to skip out on the boring content, in other words, the farming and the grinding, so that way they can get straight to experiencing the fun stuff. But it's kind of interesting because in a game that's not pay to win heavy, if someone wants to pay real life money to expedite their experience, basically hiring Jose is one of the very few ways that you can actually make progress by swiping your credit card. However, this obviously brings up a lot of issues for the community because a lot of people don't like that Jose service exists in the community or in the game because people don't really get to experience the game for themselves. And it also just doesn't feel fair that a legit person put in all the hours of grind into their own character, whereas someone who had a bunch of money was able to just expedite the progress and have an account basically make it to the end game as the legit person did. And so I personally get it. There is something definitely satisfying when you put in hundreds, sometimes thousands of your own hours to reach a goal in the game. And there's probably something in our dopamine/reward center of the brain that makes it feel so satisfying. But neuroscience and psychology aside, I think this frame of mind also applies to other things in life. I mean, if you really think about it, in our capitalist society, we really value stories of hard work, dedication, rags to riches, blah, blah, blah. Basically, we praise people who made it from nothing, but then put in a lot of hard work and effort and dedication, and then made it rich at the end of the day. But when we hear stories about Nepo babies or people who are just rich for being rich or famous for being famous, you know, like me, Jose, we kind of brush those people off to the side because they really didn't do anything to get to their current status in life. And I think we judge people this way because we know deep down how good hard work feels and to see the result of your labor. But when you just kind of like spawn in creative mode with all the rewards right at your fingertips without any work being put in at all, it can feel meaningless and sometimes really depressing. Okay, so far I know this analysis can kind of seem stupid and over the top because whatever, this is just a video game at the end of the day, but you also have to remember that it's a hobby and a very serious one, and hobbies, they mean a lot to people no matter what the hobby is. I mean, as gamers, if you think about it, we put in time, we put in money, and we put in love sometimes into these pixels, and along that journey, we also form social relationships along the way, just like we do with other hobbies. People have made lifelong friends, people they talk to every day, and people also get into serious relationships and even marriages just because of a video game or a MapleStory or hanging out on Discord. And also, there's a very select few people who actually get to make their living off of playing video games and making content and streaming their gameplay, which if you think about it in itself, you're dedicating your entire livelihood to a video game, which is a very meaningful experience and emotional experience in itself. And so what I'm trying to say, in other words, is basically that when you play an MMORPG, because it consumes so much of your world and your time and your energy, basically there's a lot of meaning behind that journey, and that meaning can vary depending on who you are. And I think that's why people feel so critical when it comes to Jose service, because they know someone who just hired the Jose didn't make it to the end game and have that meaningful journey along the way like other people did. And this can apply to other hobbies as well. I mean, if you really think about it, for example, someone who builds model airplanes, they can spend hours on end building one tiny, intricate airplane, but then you compare that to someone who basically bought the same model off the internet pre-built and then it gets delivered to their house without having to drive anywhere. You know, the person who actually built that is going to feel a lot of satisfaction along that journey, but ultimately the person who ordered it online didn't put any work, time, attention, and love into that project, so they're not going to feel that same meaning. So if we know that hard work feels so good, even when it comes to video games, why do people hire Jose to begin with? I mean, there's the obvious reason, you know, we just hate hard work to begin with and we try to avoid pain and gravitate towards pleasure. But aside from that, I can think of a few situations when it comes to gaming specifically. Like number one, maybe someone was playing the game legitimately, but all of a sudden they accepted a high-paying job that consumes way more of their time, but they still want to maintain their progress in the game. Like that's something that probably happens. Number two, maybe someone started the game, got really into it, but then got demotivated when they hit a big grinding wall. Like maybe they made it to 285 and they were like, oh my god, I can't see myself getting to level 290, but I still want to experience what the end game is all about. Or maybe number three, it's social, and maybe they have a bunch of friends who already play the game, and all of the friends are like way ahead of them, but they want to speed up their progress so that way they can be all on the same level. So no matter what the situation is, I think people would not be spending their money on Jose service unless there was some sort of meaning attached to why they wanted to progress their MapleStory character in the first place. Like maybe it's a social meaning. They want to feel included in their friend group, or they just want to be part of something bigger, like the MapleStory gaming community, you know, in this world. You know, people can feel very lonely, and being part of the gaming community and socially connected is a very meaningful experience for a lot of people. But also, maybe it's a drive for competition, clout, and status, or maybe to be rank 1. Or maybe it's just simply a passion or addiction to the game, but then they lack willpower to actually put in the grind. I mean, there can be many reasons, and if you have any other reasons down below, go ahead and feel free to comment. But what I'm trying to say is that there's always some sort of meaningful backstory as to why people want to progress their MapleStory characters and why they purchase farming services. I mean, I find it hard to believe that there's just someone in their mansion, they spin a wheel and they're like, what am I going to spend my thousands of dollars on today? And then they're like, oh, let's play MapleStory and progress a MapleStory account. Could happen, but again, very, very highly unlikely. But I think, now that I think about it, I think one of the situations that makes people want to hire Jose is because you want to have more than what you can realistically create for yourself. I mean, as humans, we love pleasure, we love social status, and we love wealth, and we're always seeking after these things, and video games are a huge source of pleasure and social connection these days. But sometimes these things are just simply unattainable for us because time restrictions, or maybe we're just not in a mental state to put up with the pain of grinding to feel the pleasure that we want to feel. And so people end up figuring out a way to quote unquote cheat the system to get what they want. So for the person who has a demanding, time-intensive job, they won't be able to make it to the end game the quote unquote normal way. And if they're also trying to balance other things in life like family, school, maintaining their six-pack abs and their health, it's also going to be impossible for them to spend the thousands of necessary hours on the MapleStory grind to make it to the end game. I mean, I think these people are ambitious to have it all in life, but paradoxically, the only way to have it all is to sacrifice something. So especially when it comes to MMOs, a lot of people sacrifice sleep and every second of their free time so that way they can grind their characters. And along the way, others sacrifice their health, their family life, and their social relationships. And for the person who is hiring Jose, or basically purchasing farming services, they sacrifice their hard-earned real-life money. So when you play an MMORPG, you just have to be honest and ask yourself these two questions. Number one, what am I sacrificing? And number two, am I okay with that? You may not find it fair that other players have unlimited free time to spend on MapleStory while you have to attend to your full-time, time-intensive job, but that is life, simply, and we can't avoid life's limitations. We're not infinite human beings with infinite amounts of time and power. You just have to play with the cards that you're dealt in life and just be content and happy with that. And if that means sacrificing a game that you really want to make progress in, just be okay with that. But on that note, for the person who is purchasing the farming services, or aka hiring Jose, there's also another obvious sacrifice. I mean, first of all, you're sacrificing a potential meaningful experience behind the MapleStory grind itself. At the end of the day, you just have to be honest with yourself and just acknowledge the fact that, yeah, you're not going to be able to know what it's like to experience that meaning and pleasure as someone who plays legitimately. And also, I think the biggest thing that we haven't talked about so far is that you're also sacrificing your account if you ever get caught using farming services. I mean, Nexon's terms of service imply that account sharing and letting someone else onto your account, which is basically what this Jose thing is, isn't allowed through their statement that you need to keep your account details confidential and secure. They can basically ban you from the game and deactivate your account if you partake in such activities, and that would mean that you lose all the progress, of course, but all the money that you spent on any in-game items, and ultimately any money that you spent on the farming services. But I think the biggest thing that you're sacrificing is the social aspect, and I think the social aspect of MapleStory is one of the main reasons why people hire Jose to begin with. I mean, for a lot of the reasons that I talked about so far in this video, people may judge you for hiring a Jose, and if you get caught, you sacrifice your reputation as a player, and ultimately your reputation as a friend, because if you go around and tell everyone in your Discord groups that you're playing legitimately, but then you get caught, your trust is broken, and that can sacrifice your reputation as a friend. These are just some of the main reasons why I would never purchase farming services or use bots, but everyone is on their own journey at the end of the day, and I'm not really here to judge that. And we also have to acknowledge that even the Joses of the world are on their own personal journey, and at the end of the day, they're just trying to make some money so that way they can survive. And funnily enough, they just so happen to be in a position in life where farming on someone's 2D MapleStory account is how they make that income. So now let's just talk about some simple economics behind this whole phenomenon. And I'm not an economist in any way, but I know that there is a huge cost of living difference in the United States, Europe, other developed nations versus countries in Latin America, for example. So we can pay what is probably a little bit amount of money for us on a farming service that would be kind of a good amount of money for someone in Latin America, for example. And in fact, I think that's another reason why the Jose meme popped up, because the idea is that there are people in Latin America and other nations that are providing these farming services for people in the Western world. But I think this is not just an economic situation in global MapleStory. Basically, other MMOs out there have their own farming service industries, and it even happens in the Korean version of MapleStory as well. In KMS, there has been a huge effort to tackle the service bind market, and I learned while watching one of Kobe's Iceling Guns' Twitch stream that apparently there is a huge Vietnamese population of players who dedicate their days to farming meso for a living in the real world. So if you ever get a chance to catch Kobe grinding his KMS character on his Twitch stream, you'll probably see him get prompted with what is called a lie detector test in the game. And these are usually just like some simple mini games that basically test you to see if you're actually botting or if you're actually farming for yourself. And it's not that hard to pass them if you're actually focusing on the lie detector. But not that long ago, a new lie detector got implemented in KMS, and this one specifically asks you to identify the correct grammar from a few sentences in the Korean language. And I think the hope is that only someone who is truly from Korea, even if you're not using bots, would only be able to pass this lie detector. And if you don't pass this lie detector, you may be flagged as someone who hires Jose. So in the global version of MapleStory, we don't have lie detectors like this, but they would have been really, really nice in the past, because there are definitely some certain points in the game's history where the game was just ultimately controlled and run by bots. In recent years, though, Nexon America has done a way better job at handling the botting situation, and nowadays you don't really see that many botters running around in the MapleStory world anymore. But I remember back in 2019 and 2020 in the Kana farming days where I literally couldn't go a single day without seeing someone who was obviously botting. However, nowadays for me, it's much harder to identify a bot because with this newly added Soul Janus skill, it basically looks like everyone is botting, to be honest. It even looks like I'm botting when I farm on my character. But I have an entire video about the psychology of Soul Janus and multitasking, which you should definitely check out next. But at the end of the day, I think this Jose thing is mostly a meme, just because people like to clown on each other and make jokes, and it's all in good fun for the most part. I'm sure there are some players, a good chunk of players who do pay for farming services, who do use bots, who do buy accounts, but I have faith that the majority of players are actually legit. So anyways, if you have any comments about this phenomenon in the MapleStory world, go ahead and leave a comment below. Happy Cinco de Mayo to anyone who celebrates, and if you're thinking about botting, just for God's sakes, get a foot pedal. I've been farming this entire time.